I've somehow decided to do this at like 3 p.m. when all the school children are coming home. So I feel very perceived right now, despite being in my yard. Don't look at me, high schoolers. I don't exist. Honestly, high schoolers still, I'm afraid of them. But anyway, welcome. This is my little safe space I've created. So today we're talking about being a fairy. And I don't mean like necessarily the gay terminology of that word. Although, let's be real, fairies are quite queer coded and they're like gender bendery and they fuck with gender, they fuck with expectations, for sure. But we're just going to be talking about kind of like what it means to be a fairy, like a fairy archetype. I'm not like delusional and think that I genuinely like have wings and can like fly around and have magic powers, but like metaphorically, I kind of do. And I do have the essence of fairy energy, and if you're watching this video, I assume that you do too. But yeah, I had this little realization this morning of it with the help of my friend who had texted me. He said, like, this is just the curse of being a fairy, being perceived as a fairy from others. And I was talking about kind of just like being in relationships and people becoming super enamored and obsessed with me. She had also had that experience, has had that many times. And honestly, the more I thought about it, the more I was like, I was connecting my experiences as being a cute and sweet and non threatening, small, cis white woman, connecting that to the fairy archetype. Being cute and mischievous, that's very part of the fairy archetype, and that is so often how people view me. They view me as adorable and like sweet and kind of like clever and like, oh, like we're gonna have a lot of fun. Like there's a lot of child's like purity and innocence that I exude, that people see, that I'm very aware of, that I exude, and it is a very like natural, authentic part of me. But yeah, what I realized about fairies though is that there's people that are fairies and there's people that are princesses. And I don't think, even as a child, that I had like my princess era. I was never a very ultra feminine child. I didn't even really like pink that much, if we're like being stereotypical, like girly about it. But I never really had that. And I never really like fit in with girls my age or little girls or the classic little girl archetype and stereotype that you would expect from like a 5-year-old girl. That never really resonated with me. I never really understood gossip circles and like talking about crushes and stuff. That didn't really appeal to me, and also something I didn't really understand either. And then circling that back to many years later when I'm like 24 and I'm like having a gender moment of like, oh, I guess maybe I was like never a girl this whole time. I've never, like, as I've grown older and become like woman, I'm like, I don't relate to certain women that I see and then see parts of myself in them. There's like a bit of a disconnect. It's like, no, that's not quite me. I find myself identifying more with people that are maybe more femme presenting but non binary, or more mask presenting but identify as woman as woman. And I find that the fairy identity, that archetype, it's very not much not woman. Going back to the princess and fairy thing. There's princesses, there's women that are comfortable with that label, that very much resonate with that identity of being this very strong feminine beauty and strength. And then the fairy energy, which can also come across as femme, and is often presented in that way, but it's a little bit more chaotic. It's a little less composed. It's more gremlin-y. A fairy is totally under the category of like gremlin kind of vibes, of the little gremlins that you find in the little nymphs that you find in the forest. You're not like the main character within the fairy tale, because the princess is. But you are your own king character within your fairy realm and your fairy world, but often people or stories don't explore that world and don't see the richness and substance to that world. It's all about the princess, where there's maybe less substance, it's maybe more typical. We all know it, you know? And this is not being like people that are more princessy or like less cool or interesting or like worse. That's not what I'm getting at here. I'm just noticing that there's different types of femme presenting people, you know, gender and all that. And I seem to fit more into the kind of androgynous, gender bender, kind of non binary, fucks with gender presentation. My personality and behaviors go flip between masculine and feminine, and I never truly feel feminine and never truly feel masculine, and just don't see myself within that princess archetype. I just don't see myself in there, even if I like wanted that, you know, which sometimes I kind of do. I'm kind of jealous of like people that are so clearly this beautiful like goddess. Like that is maybe a part of me, but that's not how I mostly view myself. But anyways, I really hope you can see my skirt a little bit in here. So it's so glorious. It has to be like a main part of this video. I'm very fairy coded. And I think a lot of people notice this about me. And well, you know what people do in fairy tales when they see a fairy? The first thing that they do is that they chase them and follow after them. Because a fairy is such an intriguing little thing. It's so small, it's so delicate, but it's like more than an insect. It has truly a mind of its own, and you can't quite communicate with it in human language, but it has human characteristics, and it's so pretty and precious and kind of devilish at the same time, and so you follow it. But the thing about fairies, the thing about the fairy archetype, is that we're never like asking to be followed. That's not we're fairies, extremely curious creatures, right? If a fairy is curious enough to follow you around and be intrigued by you, then that is high praise in the fairies books. Because a fairy, I feel like, has really seen it all. They've experienced a lot. They've seen it all in the woods. There's a lot of weird shit, a lot of weird creatures and characters within a fairy tale wood in life. A fairy's seen it all. They've collected these different personalities, made them their own. They're shapeshifters in a way. So it's hard for them to come across people that truly inspire and intrigue them. But often, fairies are followed, fairies are enamored. People obsess over finding fairies. I think of like in the Tinkerbell movies, if you know, you know. There's the dad or whatever who's like so obsessed with finding fairies. It's like his whole life. Like that just like represents like I don't know, the male gaze or something, or like many men and people that were raised as men, that it totally just represented them like obsessing over very childlike women and girls and people, and they get so obsessed over them because they're like this mystical, mysterious, you can never quite figure them out. And they're so obsessed with following that and like finding magic there when really they should be focusing on finding magic elsewhere, like within themselves, so they can attract more magic, you know? The thing about fairies is that they attract so much. They can attract so much. They're very abundant creatures. But they also you can't fuck with a fairy. You can never truly trick a fairy, no matter how innocent or well-meaning that fairy seems. They're the ones doing the tricking, whether they're consciously doing it or not. They're the ones that play little tricks on you, that make you think that you know something, or that you know something about them, or that they feel a certain way about you, or that they want you to follow you. But that's really usually far from the truth. Partially, a fairy does like to be followed. That is part of its nature. It's used to things, often bigger creatures, following it, thinking it's food or it will lead it somewhere powerful and magical. But also within a fairy's nature is to be curious and to follow others. But yeah, it's very rare for a fairy to want to follow someone, to want to learn more about something or someone. So when it does, it takes over the fairy's life and it becomes their little obsession in a way. But also, fairies are ones to lose interest quickly because it's the fairy way. And so they'll move on and wait until the next interesting character comes along. But when someone tries to follow a fairy deep into the woods, into the fairy realm, often they're not successful. The fairy manages to lose them off their trail or whatever and confuse them. And then sometimes when the fairy does either accidentally or intentionally allow that character, person, into the fairy realm, then chaos happens. The fairy world is imbalanced and weird shit happens to everyone. The fairies, the humans in the fairy world, the creatures. It's always like a hot mess and it wasn't supposed to happen. But when a fairy invites, which is okay, this is a very rare thing for a fairy to invite someone willingly into their fairy world, into their fairy land, then there is a sense of wonder with that, for sure. And the only people that are really truly allowed and fully accepted in the fairy realm are other fairies or other creatures, other wonder like fairy creatures and such. That's what doesn't imbalance the fairy realm. And a fairy just knows. A fairy knows when they see another folk tale, fairy tale creature. But the thing is, in fairy tales, fairies, it's named after fairies. Fairies, they're the main character within a fairy tale. But often they're on the sidelines, leading other characters. Because that's kind of the whole point of a fairy's journey is to help lead people into their life's purpose, into who they're supposed to meet, into learning life lessons, whatever, fairy tale story 101. There's always a lesson. That is part of a fairy's purpose is to activate, ignite, just start something, start a new path for someone by just being in someone's presence, just existing, just entering someone's life. That alone, even if the fairy is in your life for literally just a minute, it does alter something in that person's consciousness and leads them to something more magical. The thing about fairies is that part of their purpose is just to sprinkle the magic fairy dust to allow people to fly, metaphorically. Allow people to see the childlike wonder within themselves and within the world around them, to realign themselves to that. That's kind of the fairy's job. And then when the fairy kind of interacts more with that person, either that person is a very worthy fairy tale creature of some sort, or they're meant to enter that fairy realm but not stay forever. They're not meant to stay forever. That would cause chaos, as we mentioned. And sometimes the fairy makes a mistake and thinks, oh, this is one of my fellow fairy tale creatures. But no, they are but a human, or from some other distant realm where they don't belong here, but they belong somewhere else. They're just visiting and passing through. Another thing about fairies is the differences they have to a princess. A princess is meant to help you learn. A princess is meant to be, the ultra feminine, womanly figure who's gentle, who is there for you, a mothering kind of figure. A fairy is not quite that. A fairy may have both feminine and masculine features, both physically and emotionally, within their personality. But a fairy is not always necessarily nurturing, nor are they patient, nor are they calm about things necessarily. A fairy is sporadic, a fairy is a little bit chaotic, and I think that's often what appeals to people when it comes to befriending a fairy or getting to know a fairy. Yes, a princess is a lot more stable and well meaning, I suppose, than a fairy. And a fairy is neither evil nor good, but rather something in the middle. Fairies are very much this strange spectrum in between two extremes and two opposites. They're kind of everything that exists in between, which makes them so queer and makes them so kind of, gender nonconforming. But anyways, yeah, fairies, they do have a bit of a temper, if you remember Tinkerbell well. They can be impatient. They have places to be, they have goals for themselves. They're very selfish, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but they're very selfish, self focused creatures that also are focused on their fairy friends, very aware of their fairy friends, and love them. But they do not receive love in the same way that, say, a princess would, because the prince is made for the princess, That's what it's been told, and perhaps the fairy has been told that as well. But I think the fairy has always known within that there's something else in life that life has to offer, and it's a lot more complicated and not typical and perhaps even special. But they are designed to live a life that is unexpected and that does not follow customs and does not follow rules and expectations. Part of a fairy's purpose is to subvert expectations, to do things differently in their own way, to never do what is expected of them, never do what they even expect of themselves. They're just kind of living, they're so chaotic neutral. That's kind of what I love about them. I think that's what a lot of people love about them, is that fairies are so authentically themselves that part of their journey often involves hurting people unintentionally just from being themselves, just from speaking the truth, no matter how blunt and painful that truth may be, because a fairy is not meant to comfort you. Perhaps that's more in the realm of the princess. A princess is good at comforting. A princess is patient. A fairy is not those things. A fairy is not meant to guide someone, but a fairy is meant to inspire. It's meant to alter someone's consciousness, alter someone's way of thinking, of being, of existing, of viewing life and others. That alone is what a fairy is good at, and it's just part of them. They don't even have to try. And that's the same with a princess. A princess is simply good at being there, being patient, helping guide someone through. But a fairy, that's not in their nature, and they don't seem to have time for that, which I can respect. I respect that in other fellow fairy folks. But often it takes a certain someone. It takes a little gremlin, a little fairy tale creature to fully understand and see the fairy for who they are, to mesh well with the fairy, to understand to an extent the fairy's chaos and the way that they live and exist, since it can be so contradictory and so confusing and just a little bit bewildering. But again, that is what's so lovable about a fairy creature, you know? And so much of the fairies world, that fairy itself hasn't even discovered the tip of the iceberg, of their fairy realm. There's so much more to explore. It's infinite. It's like Alice in Wonderland vibes. It's like you're tripping on acid, and it's just a weird, never-ending land of time. And that's kind of how fairies exist within life. Whereas, princesses, they know the kingdom, they know where they stand, they're aware of the boundaries within the land. And we need that. We need the princesses to rule the land because someone has to. But the fairies, they're too chaotic for that. They have other important jobs. A fairy is meant to be a bit of an explorer, to allow others in need of fairy energy to explore within themselves, to explore the lands around them, to explore the people. Fairies are very Gemini energy, if you will, if you could tell, if you're into that kind of thing. Fairies are the type to still be discovering new things, no matter how long they've existed. Fairies are also ageless in a way. They are forever youthful, no matter how many years they've existed. They will forever be seen as youthful by those around them, by themselves, by whoever. And, there is, as my friend mentioned, there is a burden with being a fairy, But there's also many blessings with being a fairy. It's a very fun job to have in this world. It's often very artistic and creative and all over the place, which, can be ungrounding at times, but then sometimes it feels so necessary in order to achieve things and figure things out. There is burdens and blessings to whatever fairy tale character you embody, whatever archetype you embody. If you're a fairy, have no fear, for although your life may seem like a mess and feel like there is no straight line, there's no direct path where you're meant to be, it's because you're not meant to take the path within the fairy tale. It's because you're meant to go opposite into the woods, into the deep dark woods, and then you happen to find a magical caterpillar, and then after that it will lead you to a rabbit, and after that will lead you to something else. And with each new thing that you find, you grow closer to you. This is a path, and you grow closer to what it is that you're trying to find. That you don't even know what you are trying to find really. But you end up slowly realizing through that journey of bumping into new characters and places and feelings and sensations, through that you start to uncover what it is that you're looking for, what it is that you're meant to uncover in life and experience in life. And therefore, start uncovering yourself, uncovering your purpose. A fairy's purpose is to meet many strange folk, meet all the folks, all the characters, interact with them, not stay long, but interact enough for it to be in the fairy tale, and then move on its way to the next thing, the next unexpected thing that they don't even know what it's going to be, but they know that they are meant to move into this direction because either someone within that little moment told them to, or something within themselves. And how freaking magical is that? Anyways, I know this was incredibly all over the place, and confusing, in classic fairy energy. But I hope it brought you some sort of interesting vibe to your life, some sort of inspiration, perhaps a way to calm your nervous system, a way to sleep, a way to meditate, a way to learn something new or see yourself in me, see your fairy qualities within my fairy qualities. Yes, fairies, we must connect with other fairies and other fairy creatures. Please, if you feel the urge to, please connect with me through the comments. I'd love to know that you exist and that we are existing together at the same time, that what I'm saying is being perceived and being digested by someone else out there other than myself. That would be truly magical to experience that. And if you think I'm a total fucking weirdo who just has like a weird ego situation, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. But there's more. There's more. I wonder what next strange little conversation we'll have next, but I would so dearly love to see you, my friend, in another realm. Happy springtime, happy Taurus season, and keep on being a freaky little fairy. You know who you are. Wearing these ears does kind of hurt. It doesn't take long. Okay, fairy mode off.